Right, wait, just so I understand correctly. Are you really saying that in certain situations, the president can decide whether it's in the best interests of the nation and then do something illegal?
I'm saying that when the president does it, that means it's not illegal.
What the fuck's happening? Oh, man!
I watch movies every now and again. I dabble. I watch the first 20 minutes of Quarantine. I also dabble in movie analysis. Actually, just media analysis in general. Now, one thing you should know about media analysis on YouTube is a lot of it is complete dog shit. For some reason, there's a whole genre of movie analysis which takes movies way too literally.
For her to just suddenly turn into a murderer taking out slime balls is just insane. If she had continued on, she might have gotten her dream after all, even if it did take some unseemly actions to get there.
Some have a bafflingly hard time grasping even the basics of a movie. No, The Shining, a movie first and foremost clearly about an abusive father, is not about how Wendy is lying about being abused. That's even worse than the fucking Minotaur theory.
That's not a skier. That's a minotaur. It got this really, overblown physique, very physical physique, and then you've got the suggestion. You have a suggestion of a skiing pole there, but it's not really there.
Now, hearing this, you probably think it's foreshadowing. It's not. What should be more concerning to hear is that the video I'm talking about today is actually good. Django Unchained is an amazing movie. It's visually stunning, it's interesting, and it's funny.
You shot Roscoe! And you killed Ace!
I only shot your brother once. He threatened to shoot me.
Oh, so this video is made under the assumption you've watched Django? Go fucking watch it. It's amazing. Spoilers ahead, by the way. Today we're obviously talking about Django Unchained. Specifically, this is a response to a video titled, "Why Does Dr. Schultz Die?" Now, this may be a self-report right off the bat. I've already said this video is good. I think movie analysis has goals, including, but not limited to, spreading your opinion. Obviously, don't try to do unbiased movie analysis. It always sucks. You know, it has to make sense. It needs to be coherent. It's gotta be entertaining, and has to be able to prompt the audience to think about the media. The video, by Pretentious Anime Fan, not foreshadowing, I swear, does most of this very well. It presents an idea. Dr. Schultz killed Candie because Django challenged his moral compass and he wanted an out.
But also, the more telling part about Schultz is that he calls Django out for verbally assaulting Candie's slaves, but Django counters by attacking the hypocrisy in Schultz. We are simultaneously made aware that Django is still torn up about killing Smitty Bacall in front of his own son, but also that Schultz's code of morals is inconsistent and disproportionate with his line of work. So my new idea is that Schultz kills Candie as a reactionary gesture and not because he refuses to concede to Candie in the battle of morals and intellectuals.
This definitely has a precedent in the movie. The confrontation between Django and Schultz is an important scene. It also makes sense to argue that this is a more symbolic move as opposed to a practical one. Yeah, Schultz isn't acting very pragmatically here, but I don't necessarily think that really matters. I don't want to pretend that some actions within movies don't matter, because I'd be steering into the bad analysis territory, unless your analysis is very explicit about leaving these parts out. But I just don't know how much a pragmatic view of Schultz's reasoning fits into this kind of analysis. If we were supposed to view Schultz as selfish in this scene, they wouldn't have the memorial scene in Django's return. Of course you can view the scene like this, and Mr. Anime does mention it's just his opinion, but I just don't agree. I could also easily bring up this point.
The first instance of this flaw in Schultz's character comes from the saloon scene with Django, where he tells him he intends to make use of slavery despite his moral opposition to it. To morally bargain with himself and his own self-image, he makes Django a deal to hunt the Brittle brothers with him not as partners but as mutual parties only because Django knows what they look like. It's not a gesture of goodwill in my eyes, but more a reflection of Schultz's aversion to evil but not doing too much to usurp it. Otherwise, why bother making any effort to give Django any money at all?
It ignores a lot of the context of the movie. I think this is more of an attempt at humor on the part of Schultz.
On the one hand, I despise slavery. On the other hand, I need your help. If you're not in a position to refuse, all the better.
He gave Django a gun? It's not like he's forcing Django into anything. He's aware that Django is just as willing as he is to fucking kill the Brittle brothers. Who wouldn't? It does, however, I think, reflect Schultz's attitude.
Still, having said that, I feel guilty.
Listen, I don't think he's a perfect guy, but I don't necessarily think this has anything to do with his morality. Let's put a pin in that. This video is also good. Again, this is not foreshadowing, it's not going to be subverted by the end of the video, because it prompted me to think of Schultz's decision to kill Candie in terms of motive, both in writing and characterization. Call me stupid, but I didn't really ponder why Schultz killed Candie. I didn't know it was a point of interest. Unlike this guy, I've only watched Django Unchained twice. Thrice if you include this video's editing.
I think at this point, seeing as I've seen this movie about 6 times, it's kinda naive to think he does genuinely love Django like a son.
So this video caused me to watch it for a second time. After I'd watched it for a second time, going back and watching this video again, I realized that due to some rather major trip-ups in interpreting motive and importance of certain scenes, this otherwise well-made and concise video became, at least in my mind, viscerally wrong. So I'm not gonna be concise. I'm gonna waste your time. Section 1. Schultz, the Bounty Hunter. This video continuously focuses on the aspect of Dr. Schultz's character that involves his morality.
Contextually, this idea of a diluted moral compass is repeated throughout the film in all of our characters. By no means are Django and Schultz the most ethical people ever, but they serve to represent our dark comedy heroes, so we give them leeway. To morally bargain with himself and his own self-image, he makes Django a deal to hunt the Brittle brothers with him not as partners but as mutual parties only because Django knows what they look like. What's interesting about Schultz in this scene is that he sort of acts like the devil on Django's shoulder, trying to rationalize his trade by using the same coping mechanisms that he uses. Now, I'm not going to argue that Schultz is glamorizing his trade by any means, but he certainly isn't a man who feels ethically responsible for his actions.
And as opposed to this, Django is portrayed as having a more compelling ethical code.
Speaking of the man, Django has some compelling ethical codes that we latch onto through several scenes. An example of this comes in the form of Django's first bounty, Smitty Bacall. Schultz opens the discussion by taunting Django because he had previously said he would be enthusiastic to kill white people for money. Then Django retorts with his argument, which is that his son is with Smitty. Speaking of Candie, I think one of the most important scenes for Schultz actually happens right before they arrive at Candyland. In a confidential strategy meeting with Django, we confirm that Broomhilda is at Candyland, but we also confirm that Schultz is deeply concerned about Django's act falling apart and affecting them. But also, the more telling part about Schultz is that he calls Django out for verbally assaulting Candie's slaves, but Django counters by attacking the hypocrisy in Schultz. We are simultaneously made aware that Django is still torn up about killing Smitty Bacall in front of his own son, but also that Schultz's code of morals is inconsistent and disproportionate with his line of work. Django defeats Schultz with his own logic and worldview, which in my eyes is the point where Schultz begins to truly examine his own character.
He challenges Dr. Schultz's morality in their aside.
Don't get so carried away with your retribution. You lose sight of why we're here.
You think I lost sight of that?
Yes, I do. Stop antagonizing Candie.
I'm not antagonizing. I'm intriguing him.
You're yelling abuse at these poor slaves?
I would call a man who had me kill another man in front of his son, and he didn't bat an eye. You remember that?
But I think this interpretation ignores the more clear characterization of Schultz in the first half of the movie. Schultz is a bounty hunter. He upholds the law.
My name is Dr. King Schultz. Like yourself, Marshal, I'm a servant of the court.
Just as quickly as he'll shoot a guy in the fucking heart, will he turn around and say he's acting lawfully.
The man lying dead in the dirt, who the good people of Daughtry saw fit to elect as their sheriff, who went by the name of Bill Sharp, is actually a wanted outlaw by the name of Willard Peck.
Even when he shoots the weirdos in white bags.
Later, we see him and Django rigging their carriage to kill a bunch of weirdos in white bags and giving Django the final shot against their ringleader.
You can tell a channel's been demonetized hard when they have to censor the Ku Klux Klan. Even when he shoots the weirdos in white bags, he is acting within the law. It was self-defense. Other examples are the beginning when he shoots the slave drivers,
I only shot your brother once he threatened to shoot me. And I do believe I have 5 witnesses who can attest to that fact.
or when the Brittle brothers are killed.
I am Dr. King Schultz, a legal representative of the criminal justice system of the United States of America. The man to my left is Django Freeman. He's my deputy. In my pocket is a warrant signed by Circuit Court Judge Henry Allen Laudermilk of Austin, Texas, for the arrest and capture, dead or alive, of John Brittle, Roger Brittle, and Ellis Brittle.
Schultz is not just a character with a deluded moral compass. He is a character with a deluded moral compass who is acting within the law.
Who the hell are you got there?
The Wilson Lau gang.
Who the hell is the Wilson Lau gang?
Bad Chuck Wilson and meaner Bobby Lau and 3 of their acolytes.
It's almost reminiscent of a type of protest. He's owning the slavers with facts and logic.
Django defeats Schultz with his own logic and worldview. What's interesting about Schultz in this scene is that he sort of acts like the devil on Django's shoulder, trying to rationalize his trade by using the same coping mechanisms that he uses.
See, this is where Mr. Anime is correct in my eyes. He is rationalizing his own career, but I don't think he's rationalizing it in terms of morality, but in terms of legality. Mr. Anime interprets the Schmitty-Bacall scene as an appeal to morality, as if Schultz thinks Bacall deserves this for some moral failure.
What's interesting about Schultz in this scene is that he sort of acts like the devil on Django's shoulder, trying to rationalize his trade by using the same coping mechanisms that he uses, in sort of a man versus man or us versus them idea.
While this is definitely a factor, Schultz is much more focused on the handbill, saying they wouldn't have printed it if Schmitty-Bacall was always a farmer.
If Schmitty-Bacall wanted to start a farm at 22, they would never have printed that. But Schmitty-Bacall wanted to rob stagecoaches, and he didn't mind killing people to do it.
This is also clear later on with the Australians. Django appeals to the legality.
There was $11,500 fortune just sitting there, and y'all rode right past it.
You be damn Blackie, we're not bandits.
I ain't saying that. Nice thing about this fortune is, it ain't illegal. You can't steal it. You got to earn it, white boy.
It's an idea of morality through legality. The legality of an act, to Schultz, inherently makes it moral. This is where the biggest problem for Mr. Anime's video comes from. While he seems to understand what Schultz, Django, and Candie are doing in any given scene, he's viewing it through this moral framework. Section 2. Candie, the Mandingo fighter. Candie is interesting because he's a very complicated character.
Then we can examine the 3 dimples inside Perilda's skull!
You know, despite making a big show about how inferior black people are,
You'll notice 3 distinct dimples. These 3 dimples exist in the area of the skull most associated with civility.
he follows behind Stephen's every word. He's a living contradiction. A lot of his inherent contradictions come from his eugenicist leanings. Mr. Anime thinks the most important scene to explain why Schultz kills Candie is the aside between Django and Schultz.
Speaking of Candie, I think one of the most important scenes for Schultz actually happens right before they arrive at Candyland. In a confidential strategy meeting with Django, we confirm that Broomhilda is at Candyland, but we also confirm that Schultz is deeply concerned about Django's act falling apart and affecting them.
This is where another problem comes in for Mr. Anime. On a surface level, yeah, this makes sense. This is an important scene. It confronts Schultz with his hypocrisy. But Schultz isn't thinking of this scene when he finally shoots Candie. He's thinking of Fuck, I need to look up this fucking pronunciation again. D'Artagnan. Fuck.
Bonjour, this is Julian the Frenchman, with his full name,
D'Artagnan. I'm gonna sound like fucking Brad Pitt for this one. Right, but Schultz isn't thinking of this scene when he finally shoots Candie. He's thinking of D'Artagnan.
You brooding about me getting the best of you, huh?
Actually, I was thinking of that poor devil you fed to the dogs today. D'Artagnan.
Sure, you could push this aside as some kind of PTSD.
The scene after this is more self-explanatory in terms of the PTSD thing they got going on.
But I don't agree with that. Clearly, this is the more important scene, just by analyzing film language. I'm not downplaying the importance of the confrontation scene, but I don't think it's the most important. Schultz continuously shows visible disturbance at the practice of Mandingo fighting, allowing two men to rip each other apart in a fight to the death. Almost like those dogs, almost like that was like parallelism, almost like that's how a movie works. I wonder if that was an intentional part of the movie. I wonder if that was supposed to mean anything in the movie. Or no, it was just PTSD. Yeah, no, it was just PTSD. Right, okay.
I don't really see moments where Schultz is harboring an obvious or secret hatred for people like Candie.
This is the only point in the video that kind of borders on so wrong that it's just straight up a lie. Schultz is very clearly emotionally distressed at several points with Candie, such as the Mandingo fight I've already mentioned, and the dog scene. While this isn't exactly resentment, it's very clear repulsion at the acts of Candie. Unless you want to be pedantic, I think Schultz being barely able to hide his disgust at Candie, to the point even Candie kind of notices.
Your boss looks a little green around the gills for a blood sport like nigger fighting.
Nah. He just ain't used to seeing a man ripped apart by dogs is all.
You are used to it.
I'm just a little more used to Americans than he is.
Could definitely be counted as hatred. Mandingo fighting is the true challenge to Schultz's attitude. Section 3. This movie is not about slavery. I don't want to be one of those kind of people, but I have a lot of faith in Quentin Tarantino. I don't think he's making a movie solely about slavery. I think if this movie was only about slavery, that would kind of weaken it in my mind. Dr. Schultz represents a certain type of person throughout history. Not to get too political, but he's a liberal. At least the shitty, woke American kind. He's not a based socialist. He's a demagogue. What the fuck am I talking about? Dr. Schultz trusts the process. Despite vehemently hating the practice of slavery, as we've already established, he loves the law. These are two contradictory opinions, because obviously slavery is the law. At least at the time, it's a recognized institution within America. Schultz only allows the killing of Big Daddy once he has broken the law. To contrast this, Candie at no point is breaking the law. And through meeting Candie and witnessing Buongiorno's death, Schultz seems to realize something. Hey, the law kinda sucks. Why should you respect a system that allows someone to own another man and make him fight to the death? Why should you respect the law if the law allows you to rip another man to shreds with dogs? How can you trust the process if the process causes this? Django Unchained, much like Tarantino's other historically based action movie, Inglourious Basterds, aren't historically accurate. Like, at all. None of these events happened, so why would we think these movies are just trying to talk about slavery or Nazism? These are pieces of art, not biopics, and they shouldn't be approached as simply a narrative about their topic. Of course, the movie obviously doesn't like slavery. I'm not saying the slavery part isn't still important, you know, fuck slavery, fuck Hitler. I want to make that very clear. I'm not saying this movie doesn't say something very important about slavery, but surely it isn't just about slavery. Sure, being able to legally kill slavers is quite fun, and it definitely seems to make Schultz feel better. That's why the first half of the movie is dedicated to it. But it doesn't help. In the eyes of the law, both Schultz and Candie are legally the same. They are both working within the law. How can you fix a broken system while upholding it? Now, you could very much argue that Django is also working within the law. He gets his happy ending because of Broomhilda's deed of sale, but I think that's more of a loophole. All the signatures on the page are from dead people. Django is not upholding a system as much as he is abusing it, but then you could say that Dr. Schultz is also doing that by killing the slavers, and to that I would respond, shut up! Videos are hard to make. I'm starting to really empathize with this fucking anime guy. But yeah, I think it is more of a symbolic move on Schultz's part. There were also very clear visual similarities between the deaths of Candie and whatever the fuck this brittle brother is called. Not only does this show Schultz is starting to embody the moral standings of Django, killing Candie out of genuine resentment as opposed to the breaking of the law. See, that's how you make a moral argument, Mr. Anime. Sorry, that's passive-aggressive. But it also draws parallels between the Brittle brothers and Candie, which explains a lot of the intellectual battle stuff Mr. Anime talks about.
If you want to take it down the path of intellectuals, though, you would see it as Schultz refuses to die as intellectually inferior. As shown by him correcting Candie on Alexander Dumas being black, Schultz is a man who believes that he would rather die than admit he is on the same level as Candie, a metaphor from the handshake of good faith. So intellectual superiority is the only way to live. I find this theory not so interesting because it's not really an idea that's hammered in his character other than in wordplay and mannerisms.
Under all that pretentious bullshit, naming your fucking slave after a goddamn musketeer, Candie's just a fucking hillbilly.
Django! You black son of a bitch!
The D is silent here, baby.
Even though he's acting lawfully, he's just as bad as the Brittle brothers. Section 4. Conclusion. Again, this is not a bad video. If this was any other movie, I'd think this was a perfectly fine video. But Django Unchained holds such a special place in my heart that I don't think this video fully explores the nuances of the film. And even then, neither does this video. While I drew parallels to modern political ideologies, I don't necessarily think that Tarantino wants to brutally murder certain political ideologies. At the end of the day, Tarantino clearly thinks murder and death in movies is a bit of fun.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because it's so much fun, Jan. Get it?
In some movies, death should not be rationalized as death. I should have probably mentioned that at some point of the video. Well, it's not like I can just go back and re-record sections of this video. The joke here is that I'm currently doing that. You're perfectly welcome to agree or disagree. Again, this video is well argued, but just doesn't hold water with me. What fucking ground do I have to stand? I just watched a bad video. Fuck, it was foreshadowing.